Hey guys, welcome back to Critical Flick. Today I'll be reviewing White Man Can't Jump, now streaming on Hulu. So this movie is the modern remake of the classic 1992 film. And while it does follow some of the same beats as that film, it is distinctly changed to be more of a modern film geared towards modern audiences. And I think that change itself will be difficult for a lot of people who are fans of the original movie. Like I said, it does follow some of the same narrative threads. We're both seeing, two basketball players trying to hustle their way to the top. This movie distinctly changes the characters and their motivations in a lot of different ways. The biggest question mark for me going into this movie was Jack Harlow and his performance. Obviously, everybody knows him as a musical artist, whether you like him or you hate him. He's been in the news a lot the past few years. But I will say, while his performance isn't terrible, it does really hover around just a one-note performance. He plays this kind of quirky, likable, somewhat charismatic guy, but when he has to be elevated to a more emotional scene, or he really has to kind of put his full acting chops on display, he does fall a little bit short. Granted, this is kind of his foray into acting, and perhaps he will become better. I think there's opportunities and there's glimpses in his performance that show that maybe he does have the ability to try and elevate his performance a little bit. But I do think when you compare it to Woody Harrelson's performance in that character from the original film, I think that's where a lot of people are going to feel this falls really short. I think if you separate it from the original movie, it's a little more enjoyable, but if you compare it to it and then you try to put it on that level, I just don't think it's quite as good, and I think that's where the struggle is going to be for people, because it does feel like a movie that didn't need to be made. A lot of people say, Hollywood's run out of ideas, and this movie very much feels like that. It feels like, why are we making another White Man Can't Jump? But I have to say, if you kind of take it as a standalone film, it isn't terrible. I will say, I think the chemistry between Harlow and Walls is actually pretty decent. They play well off of one another. One being, like I said, Harlow is kind of more goofy, offbeat character, while Walls is a more serious individual. And I think their backstories, how they align with one another, works for the narrative. You have both of these individuals being former basketball players that kind of had their careers cut short, one by being arrested, one by having constant injuries, and it's their battle to figure out where they need to do with their lives, trying to move forward and progress as individuals while still chasing their dreams. And I think that's a really strong narrative for people that want to, continue their dreams, whether they faced adversity or not. So I think it works on those levels. But like I said, the performances fall a little short. I also feel like there's some pretty stark tone shifts and some pacing issues with this movie. It feels much longer than it actually is. It's one of those things where you have these guys they keep playing basketball games, obviously as you would expect, trying to get into tournaments, trying to make more money, and then there's just a roadblock every single time. And it feels a little repetitive at times. And it jumps back and forth between being a very goofy movie that you can't take serious at all, with like a lot of weird one-off quips, to trying to be really heavy-hitting at times, particularly in the third act. And I think if they were able to blend it better, it would be a more enjoyable film. But trying to have a movie with these like goofy, weird jokes thrown in with like some really hard-hitting moments with loss and struggle, that it just doesn't work when it's mixed together like that. I also feel like this movie doesn't capture the energy of the first film, of the original film. Like I said, it does feel very monotone. It feels very flat for the most part. There are some shining moments. I do think when it tries to kind of punch above its weight and tell a more important and a more poignant story, I think those moments are probably the best in the movie. But if you're someone who's going in to watch it as someone a fan of Jack Harlow and you want to see his like charismatic personality, I think those moments will be enjoyable for you. But having it blended together, kind of tell a more hard-hitting and serious story, kind of mixed in with some goofy dialogue, that's where I think it falls a little flat. The movie does also wade into race relations, and I appreciate the effort of trying to do that. It feels very heavy-handed at times, and it's really, honestly, a little awkward occasionally that they keep trying to force it over and over and over again, because there's some moments where I actually do think it works, but then when you keep hitting the nail on the head over and over and over again, it starts to lose a little bit of its meaning and its impact. So overall, if I were to rate this remake, I would give it a 5 out of 10. It's a perfectly average movie. Like I said, if you separate it from the original film, I think it's a little bit better, but if you try to compare it to that movie, it doesn't feel in many ways necessary. It doesn't feel like it elevates it or changes it enough to make it worth being made at the end of the day. So I think that's going to be the real struggle with audiences with this one. But if you're a fan of Jack Harlow and you want a pretty lighthearted, easy watch, I would recommend it if you want to check it out. If you watch the original one, maybe you could check it out and see how it feels for you. I'll be really interested to see how people feel about this one. If you're a big fan of the original movie, how do you feel about it? If you didn't like the original movie, did you not like this one as well? Always leave those comments down below. I love to hear everybody's opinions. Remember to like and subscribe, and see you guys next time.